this is so this session is going to be like talking about the developer features we have released in 5.0 beta. I'm Anil Kumar, Principal Product Manager at Couchbase. So I'm responsible for Couchbase Server product strategy, product development, roadmap, positioning, messaging, and stuff. Along with me, I have Eben. He's a senior software engineer. He's the guy who built the workbench and all the stuff which you will see in the whole developer preview. It's all Eben, right? Right. So here's the agenda. So before I start talking about what all the stuff here, again, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt us. And in fact, if you the main thing about this whole presentation is about the live demo. So we will I'll try to cover all this stuff quickly so that we have ample of time for the cool demo which Eben is going to do. Right. So just to get started quickly on this, so we have we released Query Workbench, the Query Workbench in the Couchbase Web Console in 4.5 last year, right? The Query Workbench which will allow you to basically do the development on the Couchbase server using NQL query language, right? So if you have downloaded Couchbase 4.5, if you have played with the 4.5 and then 4.6, so you'll know that Query Workbench is part of the web console itself. You can open the query editor, start writing the NQL queries. It will show you the results in 3 output format. So we got some pretty good feedback from the community, from developers, from forum, also from customers, right? So we kept the momentum. So there's a lot of new enhancements we added to the Query Workbench based on the feedback we got from you guys. So one of the biggest improvement we have done is the visual query plan. So we kept hearing when we looked at the forums.couchbase.com, a lot of guys were basically asking questions about NQL, or when we got from our SCs, we are helping this customer, and this is the query plan, right? So there was a big gigantic JSON query plan. It's very tough to understand this query plan because you need to understand how it is compiling, where is the bottlenecks, which indexes are being created. So it becomes very complicated to understand that. So what we wanted to do is create a graphical query plan, so which shows you the whole query plan to basically makes it easier to understand the whole query plan. Along with that, give you additional information, which is which bucket which bucket is running, what are the fields, what indexes has been considered for this query. So, and I'll take an example, and it will show you. So if you look at, and again, I didn't. So I could have put the text query plan here, so it would have been easier to make sense, because when you look at now, we have this new graphical query plan which shows you basically which operator, what time is spent, how much time or how much cost has been spent on each of those bubbles, right? So each bubble is basically the operation which has been performed as part of this query execution. Again, there is basically it has a color coding which shows you how much is how much time is spent in each of those each of those operators, right? Again, as part of demo, Eben is going to talk about one particular scenario, and he'll explain how much time or cost has been spent on each of those operators, right? And we have, if you look at, so if there is a really complex query, and if this is there's multiple subqueries and you have unions and stuff, so it's going to be a big one, right? So to make it easier to understand, we have this 3 zoom buttons so that we can see the snapshot. The idea here is when you look at one of those, in this case, I just want to highlight here. Let's say in this case, you see the filter here, which is completely full, right? So what it tells to you is everything else, there are some other operators which are not consuming any time, or it's not adding any cost to the whole compilation. Only the filter is taking up a lot of time. So you will have a focus area to jump into that particular operator and say, hey, what's happening here? It gives you additional information of how much items it has processed, how much time it's been spent there. So then you can start thinking about whether I need, how do I optimize it, right? So that's the idea. So make it easier for you to drill through and understand where the problem areas are and start working on optimizing it. So this is the big enhancement from the Query Workbench perspective, because this is exactly as I said, query explain plan in the past was text, very complicated. We wanted to make it easier for you guys, right? Second part is again, this is again part of the Query Workbench itself. So when you're working on the NQL queries, for your application, you're writing multiple queries, you're executing them. So you you would have executed multiple queries. Now you want to go back and forth between them. So we want to provide we have this query history window which gives you a full view of all the queries you have executed. You can search on it. You can in fact select query. If you want to clear the queries, you can delete them. But the main idea is make it easy for you to navigate between the queries you have executed, right? And again, I'm trying to go quickly so that again we'll have a live demo to talk about exactly the stuff I'm talking about here. Query preferences in the past. So the query service which is your NQL service which is running. If you want to basically set the parameters for that, in the past you would have to go to the CBQ, which is our command line tool, to set the parameters, set the runtime parameters. Now we have this window on the query workbench itself, which will let you set those parameters on the in the UI. So which is you can set the query max parallelism, like number of threads you want to run, scan consistency, named and positional parameters. Right. Moving on, so we have. So again, this was in some sense we had this feature in the 4.5, but now it's much more we have kind of it's fully ready now. So which is import and export. The idea is if you want to save your query which is already executed, and you want to save this query to your file system, you can use our the save query so that you can save it in a text format. And if you want to basically let's say you have already saved the query and you want to load this query, you can load that query from your file system. That's only for the query, but also you can save the result to the JSON format. So let's say if you execute a query and you want to save the results to the file, you can save it in a JSON format, right? So that again, that's a new feature in the 5.0. One of the other improvement I'm very passionate about this is basically, so this is another thing which a lot of the customers and the developers talked about is hey, if I want to monitor the query service, how do I do that? Right now, if you want to know what queries have been executed, what are the active queries, what are the completed queries, so you want to know what's happening with the query service. To get a view of if you want to see what's happening with the query service, in the past you would have to go to the command line and look at the system catalog files. But what we have done is we brought that information to the console itself. So essentially, there is a new query window on the web console. This will give you I'll take an example. So this will give you the complete picture of what there are on the top corner. You'll see there is a active, completed, and prepared. So the active window will show you all the active queries which have been running on the query service. Let's say if you have a 20 node cluster, right, and then you have 5 nodes of query service running. This query monitoring will be basically capturing all the information for all those query service nodes, right? So let's say if you the queries here, on the active queries, you're looking at a bunch of queries getting executed, and one of them is taking a lot of time, right? So there is a long-running query, and which is hogging your machine, right? So you can basically edit from here and kill that query, right? Plus, you can on the bottom you will see there's stats which we also show, which shows you how how many queries have been taking up how much time, in the sense how many queries are taking less than 5 seconds or 10 seconds or 20 seconds. That gives you a kind of an analytics on top of your query service itself. Completed queries gives you an idea of how many queries have been executed. There's a bunch of other information which is who is executing this query, how much duration they are taking, a bunch of other information along with that. Prepared statement is again, if you have prepared statements in your query service, it gives you an idea of how many prepared statements you're executing, how much time they are taking, plus those again the same stats along with those information, right? So again, this is I'm just quickly go through, and then again, but live demo will talk a little bit more into each of them. But the idea was we had this cool query workbench which made it easy for NQL development, but we wanted to enhance it, make it much easier for you to debug it, also monitor it, right? So that's the new tools we are introducing here, right? So one of the things which we kept hearing from the lot of developers were how do I so previously we had the CV doc loader tool which will load the JSON documents to the Couchbase server, but there was no there was a there was CB-docload also imported the CSV format of the data to the Couchbase server, but it was not efficient in some sense. It was older tool written in Python. We wanted to we rewrote a tool which basically is a much more performant, and it imports JSON documents, CSV format, TSV format, and also it has multiple thread. You can increase the thread count, so it basically parallelizes and imports the data much quicker, right? So this is so we are introducing two new tools like CB import and CB export. I'm not going to spend time here because I think Eben is going to do the demo on these two tools. Like the CB import, as I said, it can import CSV format and JSON format. Export right now only exports to JSON, so it doesn't export to the CSV. Right? One another important enhancement is so. If you are used to Couchbase, in the past we have this Couchbase web console. We have in the 5.0, when you download the 5.0, you will see a brand new UI which is completely redesigned. One of the goals was make it more enterprise grade UI, usability perspective, and also give more information, notifications, and the again in the consequent releases we are trying to focus on make the graphs much more interactive, so that now if you can go back and forth and see exactly what event happened and what time happened, so it gives you more control over your monitoring stuff. So again, that will do more stuff in the demo. Plus, this is the a dashboard which gives you a full full snapshot of the stuff. We have on the side we have a navigation which gives you quickly you can jump through multiple. If you want to go to see, if you want to go to the query workbench, you can go to the query link. One thing which again Eben will show you in the demo is we have RBAC in 5.0. So when you log in as a developer, there are a lot of things. For example, the operational stuff will not be even shown there, right? So UI is now it's smart enough to understand that you are a developer, and bunch of it basically does the UI. Optimizes the UI for you. So you know exactly what you're a developer. You want to go to the query workbench, you execute the queries, and that's exactly what it shows you, right? But if you log in as an administrator, then they have full access to the whole cluster, and you get to a lot of other information, like you get notifications and alerts and stuff, right?
Okay, so. My name's Eben Haber. I've done a lot of work on the front-end tooling, and the goal is to sort of try and reduce the barrier to using Couchbase for developers. And to start off, as you just heard, we've done a lot of work on the UI to really redesign the whole thing. So what you can see, well, one thing is that the UI used to be fixed in a certain size, and now we try and take advantage of the whole width of the screen, so that if you've got a large data set, you can actually see more of it. In fact, by the time we release the GA version of this, it should work from very large monitors all the way down to tablets, or even if you're really in a tough spot on a phone. So if you are out and about and need to read balance, you should be able to do that from a mobile device. The second thing is, as Anil just mentioned, that, for example, we have role-based access control. Here I've got a developer role who has a number of query-related permissions. And so if I sign out and sign back in as the developer, you can see that there's a lot less of the UI, because that developer is not allowed to rebalance nodes or a lot of other things, but can at least see the summary of the servers, do the query workbench, and has access to at least looking at some of the settings. So we're trying to make the UI, you no longer as a developer have to have admin credentials, which should reduce some friction in some environments. Now, the next thing is, as a developer, the first thing you're going to want to do is load data into the database, into Couchbase. So you heard about CB import and CB export, so I'll show you some examples of that. So the first, I looked on data.gov, which has all kinds of handy data sets. So I got a CSV file of most popular baby names by sex and mothers' ethnic groups in New York City. And just to show you an example of how CB import works, well, you just CB import You say it's a CSV file, you give it the information about the cluster, you give it the file name, and the last thing you need to do is you need to give it some way of creating document keys, because every document in Couchbase has a key. Now you can generate the name, so in this case this is saying generate a key based on the name, year, and ethnicity, which should be a unique key for this particular data set. So I can copy that, I can paste that, and away it goes, and in a few seconds it's loaded all this in. Another example is CB is a JSON file. I sampled a couple thousand Twitter tweets on NoSQL topics, and that's relatively complicated JSON. Once again, I'm generating a key. There's an ID underscore str field, which is a unique identifier for those tweets, and so I can load that in, and that loads in. And so then I can, and CB export, I mean, this just exports the, so there's not a lot to say about CB export, or not a lot to demo about it. It works similarly. So here I've got, let's see, I'll refresh, and I should have some data. I have some data. I've got data in my tweets bucket. I've got data in my names bucket, and I can use the schema inferencing to say, oh, well, let's see. It says it has the count, ethnicity, name, rank in terms of name, sex, and year.
Just want to add one thing. So people who are, if you don't know about the schema analysis, what we do is, again, JSON doesn't have a schema, right? So, but what we do is we infer the schema, right? So, like in this case, when so as Eben showed, he imported the data to the Couchbase bucket. In this Couchbase bucket, he has so we basically run the schema analysis. We infer the schema and basically find out what are the fields in those documents. And this is on the side, whatever you see is basically a schema inferred, right? So it will help you in your development, right? So when you're looking at,
So let's see. So I can look into my history and I can see, oh yes, this is the history dialog that he just mentioned. I can see all the queries that I've run against this particular cluster. I can also search for them. If I want to search for the names bucket, I can see all the queries that I've done. Okay, let's see all the people in New York, or all the babies born over a couple years named Ben, and since there weren't any Ebens, and I can also view this as a table, and it looks like all of them are to Caucasian mothers in 2013 and 2014. So, yeah.
So any questions so far? I mean, feel free to ask any questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Might be a little off, but can you create reporting through getting that data? For example, if I want to create reporting that I get the report saying that this is how many people named Ben every week, for example.
Well, so these queries, you can run them as part of a script that you run once a week. And we don't have any formalized infrastructure, but it's just a regular nickel query. So.
I mean, there's no automated process that I can run.
So you can connect to a BI tool. In this particular case, it's like Slam data, or it could be like so you can create a job which continuously runs this query to produce the report for you. Right? Yeah, you can do. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
No. So if you are going to be using CBU import, yes, you have to come up with some way of coming up with a unique ID for each document. Now there is a function that you can use in that expression, which is an incrementing number. So if you just want it, number 1, 2, 3, 4, you can use that. Yeah. It might be more useful from a data modeling perspective to have a key that has some meaning with respect to the data, but it's not necessary.
So if you don't specify that the ID, then we usually generate this unique ID.
For CB import, you have to specify the key.
Correct. Yeah. So it's recommended to have the ID, so that their key, so that you can basically identify the key and basically pull up the document. Yeah.
Okay, so in this particular case, I have the when I can execute queries, but I can also, there's a button for explain. So if I have a query that might be expensive and I want to look at the plan for it, I can click on explain, and it will show me what the plan is expected to look like. And when I actually run the query, it gets the actual timings of each query operator and also the number of documents in and out. So in this particular case, before this started, I created an index, and so this query runs very fast in under 5 milliseconds, and because it is able to do an index scan on the data, it can run fairly quickly. Now I can look. Other things to note in this plan that are very helpful is it will give you a list of all the fields, all the buckets, and all the indexes used in the query. This is very useful. For example, there are a number of fields in names, but what if I misspelled something? What if I said select rank, but instead of spelling it with a capital R, I spell it with a lowercase r. Because I have the schema inferencing, even though we don't have a formal schema, we have this informal schema, and we can issue a warning saying names.rank is not a field we happened to find when we did our schema inferencing. So that might be a typo. So we're trying to help you find errors and spot them, because especially with complex queries, if you don't get your capitalization right or use underscore instead of camel caps, errors can occur and they can take a long time to spot. So I have an index on name, so this particular query ran very quickly. The index happens to be called idx underscore name. I could say drop index names.idx name. And then if I go back and try and run that query again, before I ran the query, it took about 5 milliseconds. If I don't have that index, it takes about 200 milliseconds. And this time you can see, or you might or might not be able to read that the filter operation has to go through all the records in the bucket and to get just those two out. So noticing that these are all marked in kind of gold, that helps highlight the fact that that's an area where you need to concentrate. So the next thing I'm going to show is query monitoring. So this is something that will show you all the live requests or all the live queries. Right now, there's not a lot going on the system, so I'll start up. So I have a script. Oh, and of course I changed one of the port numbers. So I'll just quickly change that. Try that again. No. Okay, so now I'm running some queries. I'm giving it some load, and so you can see that there's a new query. It's running queries sequentially with a particular number associated with it. So you can see the sequence number, and you can also see at the bottom there's some statistical data that's normally shown in the statistics area. So you can see that the load is increasing. You can see the number of requests per second. If I see a query that I really don't like, I can actually click cancel on that. So I can just, but that script in the background is going to keep coming back. In this particular cluster, I don't have any long-running queries, but or actually, I guess I do. Queries that have taken more than a second by default are shown in the query monitoring section, so I can see all the queries that have taken a long time. I can sort them by the query or by how long they've taken, by the results. You also should be able to see whether something was completed or stopped. But I guess I don't have any. Oh yeah, I don't have any long-running queries that have been stopped. And if you see a query here that you want to actually try and change, so this is a query that took a long time. Maybe I want to bring that back into the query editor and modify it, see if I can get it to run faster. That's a little convenience feature. Query monitoring also, if I don't have any prepared queries, but if I had prepared queries, it could show me how often the different prepared queries had run and the average statistics on how long it took them to run. All of these lists of queries are updated every 5 seconds, but you can click pause and you can just freeze that if you want to examine the particular list in more detail. And let's see, I guess I've got a few more minutes,
Yes.
so shall I show them the document editor?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, so this is a
Developer preview. Actually.
this is a developer preview, but it's we're hoping to make it at least available as a okay. Let's see. Let me just cancel my background job. So the goal is right now, if you just need to tweak a document in Couchbase, we have only a text editor, and it's limited in size, and so it's not very helpful. So let's say I want to look at the names database that I loaded in. I can select the first 10. I can page through these. I can say, oh, well, let's see. This one, there weren't 13. There were actually 15 that year. And then I have the option of saving that back. I can make a copy of this as a new document. I can edit this document as straight on JSON and since the tabular view is not good for actually changing the length of arrays or adding new fields. Or I can just say I want to delete that document. So the goal of this is to take the existing document editing functionality that we had and make it richer. We also could specify a where clause. So if I wanted to say where name, and I want to see all the names that begin with Z, I can say Z%. And I can see what documents are like that. So this is something that will be available. Oh, and there's one more feature that I forgot. Oh, is there a question?
Yeah.
The current version, if you're editing a document and the values are long, it gets truncated, is that still an issue?
That bug has been fixed in 5.0.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's JavaScript can't handle integers more than.
So this feature which Eben is showing right now, it's a developer preview, but in the future release, this will replace the old one. Yeah.
Okay, and then there's one more feature I wanted to show you, one more way of getting data into Couchbase that is really quite cool. Let me find, yes. So there is a new function in Nickel called curl, and it will go to a REST API and retrieve some data and treat that as a key space in Nickel. So you can actually run a query. So in this case, I'm saying select star from curl, and I'm running I'm going to the Yelp API to find restaurants near this hotel. And so what I'm doing in this particular case is I'm saying insert into, and I've got a, let's say, I don't want default. Let's say I think I need to change that to restaurants. So yeah, I've got to change that to restaurants. So insert into restaurants, and I give it a key of value. And the key is actually coming from this piece of JSON that comes back from the Yelp API. So I can copy that and put that in here. And it runs. And now if I say select star from restaurants, you can see the JSON, or it might be a little bit easier to read as a table. Okay, so the first restaurant is an Italian restaurant. It also has some gluten-free food, and it's 223 feet away. I can sort by distance. I want to find the very closest restaurant or one that's farther away. It has URLs. So this is all the data that came back from Yelp, and now it's sitting in a bucket in Couchbase. So if you want to be able to load data on a regular basis, or just for testing out, or even write queries, you don't even have to put the data in a bucket. You can just write a query around that data to process it. That's a very cool feature that's new in 5.0. Yes?
Cool.
That syntax is pretty cool. Could you include it in your presentation for examples if you wanted to?
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah. Any other questions? Again, download 5.0 beta. This is all available with 5.0 beta now. Yeah, please give us a feedback. And again, as I said, Eben said, we are working on making more changes to the query workbench, query monitoring, and this is all the tools. So if you give us a feedback, we'll work.
We take your feedback very seriously, and a lot of these ideas come from customers. So.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.